Hello, my survivor friends. This is another one of those interview segments that we're doing to keep you interested and engaged between seasons. So if you don't want to listen to this, now's your time to get off the plane. In this case, and it's going to be about 40 minutes, 40 minutes. In this case, I'm interviewing JeffBracket, who is an indie writer, an indie author, who's also one of the members of our Apocalypse support group. Jeff was kind enough to let me listen to the audio of his first book, Half Past Midnight, which is a nuclear apocalypse story. And I listened through that and I enjoyed it. One of the things you'll hear us discussing is the sympathetic character of there's a prepper who's like the main protagonist here. And I never really thought of these characters in this way. To me, there was always something a bit unsettling about the basic assumption of the prepper community and how they're painted. But I agree. It's good to be as prepared as possible, as much as you can, anyhow. But I worry about the self-fulfilling nature of the preparedness, right? The underlying assumption. But in a broader sense, every character and every community, no matter who it is, it's important to listen and to understand and not to treat people or groups as random caricatures or cutouts. Because in real life, IRL, no one is a group. No one is a caricature. In real life, everyone is an individual, a living, breathing person. And they're making rational decisions in accordance with their worldview. And it's a lesson for me as a writer to see the good and the bad in every character's motivation, and to work with that as part of the conversation, as part of the story. And that's why I am, and most of you probably are too, I imagine, drawn to that classic anti-hero archetype, like the man with no name, the road warrior. Love those characters. The character who you're not quite sure whose side they're on, because ultimately they're on their own side with their own motivation. And I think that's an important lesson for us. We need to resist the easy answer, right? We need to understand that the vast majority of people are acting rationally in accordance with their worldview, because humans have a tendency to take the shortcut of labeling people or labeling groups, categorizing, because then they don't have to do the hard work of understanding the worldview and the motivation. And that's lazy thinking, lazy writing. So anyhow, Jeff and I had a conversation around some of these things. I would posit that there's too much of this us versus them thinking going on in the world today. And it'd probably be better if we all took a breath to understand each other's motivations. We might get along better. But anyhow, enough of that. Jeff and I have a good chat around the struggles of being an indie author, but also the opportunities. And we talk about his stories and his characters. And we get a bit into the detail of the creative process. And I find it fascinating how much the indie author world mirrors so many other worlds that I bump up against. It's the same in startups or in business or in sports, for instance, right? The ante to get into the game is a quality product. You have to start with a quality product. But you can't just have a quality product. You need more than that, right? Then there's this aspect of quantity. And indie authors, like so many creators, find that they're forced to create a lot of output to survive. And that shapes them in the creative process. And finally, the third thing is the much hated process of sales and marketing, right? It's a universal tenet that the quality and the quantity being equal, that person who sells the most effectively gets the biggest piece of the pie. So you'll hear that as well. And if you live long enough, you'll see these patterns in everything. By the way, I don't like to use that piece of the pie metaphor that much because it assumes there's a finite quantity of pie. That's a scarcity mindset. What you really want to do is think of it in terms of how do we make more pies so everybody can have a pie. That's abundance thinking. Enjoy the chat and keep surviving. All right, we're recording. So, hello, Jeff. How are you? Do we have good energy today?
You bet. 9:30 in the morning, and I've had a cup of coffee, so let's go.
We were talking about on the Facebook, we were talking about what we would miss the most in the apocalypse, right? And I
Right.
wrote, my post was, I would kill you for a cup of coffee in the apocalypse. And I got censored by Facebook.
Well, that doesn't surprise me.
They said I was being hostile. So
well,
don't get between me and my coffee.
I've been thrown in Facebook jail myself.
Yeah. So Jeff, ended
up quoting a science article. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, it sounds like we got a little bit of a lag here, so we'll have to practice taking a one breath beat between interactions. So give us the 200 words on who you are and what you do.
Well, I am JeffBracket. I am currently a full-time author, although that may change. That's a rough gig. You know, they have the stereotype of the starving artist for a reason. Unless you get that magic ticket, sometimes it's rough to try and make it as a writer. But I've had the very good fortune of having a wife that has been able to support my habit, and we're going to try and, I guess you'd say, subsidize the income here, because her job just went away recently, and we've got enough to live on, but don't know how long that's going to last.
What are your books and what's your specialty? That's why we're talking, right?
Right. Let's see. I've got two main series going right now. The first one is the one that meshes in with what we're doing here. It's a post-apocalyptic series. It started with midnight, and there is a novella. I call it a companion novella called The Road to Rejas, and then a full-blown sequel called Year 12, which, as you might guess from its title, takes place 12 years after what I call Doomsday in the book.
Yep.
And takes some of the characters from the first two and blends them together.
Yeah. So I did. I actually read the Midnight, the original novel, and this is your first novel. So you said you've written better stuff after that, but then you sent me the audio, so I listened through it while I was out and about last weekend doing my things, or the weekend before. Midnight. This is a nuclear apocalypse, right?
Right.
Your protagonist is, for lack of a better description, a prepper, right?
That's correct.
I was interested by how you positioned your protagonist as a prepper, because maybe not in our audiences, but in the broader public, when you use that descriptor, a prepper, right? A lot of people will think, here's the psychotic guy hiding in his bunker writing manifestos, right? Whereas you position if there's actually a nuclear war, you actually need this guy. So talk to me a little bit about, because I know this comes in part from some of your experience as well. Talk to me about what you were trying to do there.
Well, a couple of things. One is change the public perception of what prepping is. Most people, the only exposure they've had to prepping is, shows on TV, Doomsday Prepper and all of that crap. That's really not what's going on. Think of them as souped up Boy Scouts, really. They just like to be prepared for what might happen. And yeah, a lot of people get into it, out of fear. They, for instance, right now, I am a member of a prepping group. We've got, I think we're pushing 1,400 members right now. And over the last couple of years, the numbers have been growing incredibly, because people look at COVID, they look at the economy, they look at the food shortages, they look at the gas prices, and it's like, hey, things are not going all right. And so a lot of people freak out and they look around for prepper groups. And yeah, there are going to be some militant groups out there. We definitely try and keep them out of the mix, because the reality is, if you can't last past, say, losing your job, or just an extended illness where you've lost some income, then you're in no way ready for the end of the world or an apocalypse. So we stress with people, just get a little extra food. Every time you go to the store, buy an extra cans of, a few extra cans of something that you like. We generally try and calm people down, because that, the stuff you see on TV, the guy in the bunker, as you put it, who's, got 1 million guns and 5 million rounds of ammunition, that's not your typical prepper. Most of them, you think of them more as homesteaders. There are people that grow their own food, preserve it, learn different ways of living off grid if it comes to it. And, just in general, try and, prepare for what hardships life might bring you, hence the word prepper.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things in there. One is sort of this feeling that you need an insurance policy against disruption, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that sounds fairly rational, right? Because
Right.
Prepping for a nuclear war is a fool's errand, because if there's a nuclear war, none of us are going to walk away from that anyhow, right? So whether or not you have 3 or 4 extra cans of Campbell's chunky chicken noodle is not going to make the difference in that scenario. So in your case, the community is more about sort of disruption insurance, and then a back to the land kind of thread, which has been common in society forever, right? Ever since the first machine
Right.
Was smashed with a sledgehammer by the Luddites in England, there's been that thread. No, because I definitely saw that in your book, right? Where you didn't make your protagonist into a superhero, but you made him into an accountable, responsible citizen, right? Who had these skills that he had acquired in case of this disruption, which was interesting. I like how you did that.
I grew up and lived in Houston for 50 years, and we had thunderstorms and hurricanes that caused power interruptions for days. Luckily, I wasn't there for Harvey, so I didn't see the heavy flooding that they got shortly after I moved up to Oklahoma. When you're living, without power, and whenever you've got that hurricane that's rolling into the Gulf, one of the first things that always happens is all of a sudden the grocery store shelves are empty. People wait to the last minute and they panic, bread, milk, whatever basics they can think of. And it expands during the panic. And we try and show people is there's no need to panic if you treat it like insurance. You got extra food, don't sweat it. Don't join the panic. Stay home. Leave the food for the people that don't have it. And try and if you need to hunker down, then you hunker down. If you can get out of Dodge, then you get out of Dodge. We learned very quickly during Rita, getting out of Dodge that presents its own problems too.
Right.
I was working IT at that point, and our company, unfortunately, our disaster recovery site was in Port Fourchon, Louisiana. And if you remember, when Rita hit, just a few weeks after Katrina, our disaster recovery site was gone. So they had us scrambling, trying to unload our servers from the building, pack them in a U-Haul, and drive them up to a facility in North Texas. We all got to the building at midnight. We looked down, and the roads were gridlocked. And that was the night before Rita hit. There was no way we were getting servers out of that building and up to North Texas.
Yeah, that's poor emergency response planning. So in that sense, you as preppers in general as a community become a buffer that helps with the disruption itself, right? So you can buffer that response a little bit, and that's what you're talking about. So
Exactly.
What caused you to try to get into being a full-time writer? What are your influences in terms of the stuff you read and the stuff that inspires you?
Ironically enough, not post-apocalyptic authors. I guess my heaviest influence would be Dean Koontz.
Okay. Yeah.
I've always enjoyed his type of writing, the macabre that's kind of mixed with the everyman. I've just enjoyed his writing style. Now, granted, he can have some real stinkers, just like everyone. But when he gets it right, man, his books are just amazing.
Yeah. No, he's a good writer, and he does well with the craft of writing as well, right?
Yes.
So
absolutely.
he's a very technical writer as well. Tells a very good story, strong dialogue. Yeah. And one of the things he's really good at is when you have those scenes, let's call them like chase scenes, right? Or any kind of tension building and release. He's really good at that.
Right.
That foreboding, foreshadowing, and then entering into the moment and then the resolution at the end. Yeah.
Right. I agree. It's I preferred him over King. And, for the most part, anyway, King, man, when he got it right, it was just amazing, too. But, we go here from post-apocalyptic to horror at that point. And
yeah, I think King is just, again, a very technically strong author. It's basically his skill set is above par, right? It's like that person who could hit 1,000 foul shots in a row. He's just technically amazing. I'll tell you, I think Kuntz has a good balance. So he has some comedic books that I really like the Odd Thomas series, which you wouldn't think of those as comedy per se, but they are, right? They're funny as hell.
Yeah, they absolutely are. Yeah. And TikTok. Did you ever read that?
I don't know if I have or not. I mean, I am a sort of a voracious reader, so a lot of times I read stuff and then forget I've read it. I'll do that thing where I'll be at a used book sale and I'll buy a bunch of books, and then I'll start reading them and go, dang, I've already read all these books.
Yeah, I don't get to read as much as I used to. When you're trying to write, then you've got to give up some of your free time.
Yep.
And I've gotten to where I'm spending probably about 90% of my free time with either the writing, the editing. The marketing is terrible. But writing is just, they say if you can make a living doing something you love, then you'll never work another day. I have been very fortunate with that in the last several years.
Yeah. Well, I find that there's you get into flow states, right? And if you can get into those flow states, it's a blast. It's like riding a roller coaster, right? Where the story kind of writes itself and you are just sort of watching, right? This
yeah, exactly.
But that's one of the other reasons why you have to really minimize disruptions in those writing sessions, because if your phone buzzes, you just blew yourself out of flow state, and it's going to take you you may never get back in, or if you do, it'll take you X minutes to get back in, right? That's a precious thing, that flow state when you're writing. It's gleeful, right? It's just you're smiling when it's happening. I'm with you 100%, and that's why I do it as well.
So what else? Characters just take over.
Yeah, the characters take over. Exactly. Right. It's like, where did that come from, right? Who are your sort of favorite contemporary indie authors right now in this little circle of starving artists that we hang out with?
Oh, well, my favorites, of course, are the ones that aren't really starving anymore. I have post-apocalyptic is not the only genre I write in. I also write some cyberpunk. I've got another series there called Amber Pain, and I'm about to make my first foray into military science fiction. And as a result, I've been reading a lot of military sci-fi authors, Craig Martell, Terry Mixon, people that most of your audience probably have never heard of, but they're really good indie authors that they're not being pretentious. They're not even trying to go, traditional publishing route, simply because why would you give 70% of what you earn to someone else after you've written the book when they aren't doing anything for you anymore?
Yeah, and frankly, they really aren't in a position, especially for new authors, to do anything for you anyhow, right? So they're not gonna make the effort to do the individual marketing and publish in that world anymore, right? It just doesn't exist.
That is why the big six publishing is now the big five, and they're still struggling. They lean so heavily on people like Kuntz and King and all the big name authors. What are they going to do when those guys retire? They have killed their mid list, and it's going to be rough for them. Amazon is the giant that is pretty much taking over a lot of different industries, but especially the music and writing industries.
So the positive is that anyone, you, I, anybody who wants to can just start writing and write a book and get it published in the indie world. It's the barrier to entry is really low. The negative is that these corporations, Amazon and others, are very good at commoditizing content, right? And we saw it with the music industry, right? They hollowed out the music industry. So, instead of selling, if you got lucky and got a publishing contract and sell your book for, I don't know, $15.99 in the bookstore, where you get, 20% of that. Now you have to write 5 of those and sell them at $1.99 to $2.99 because that's what the market buys.
That 20%, that only goes to their big names. Most authors get more like 10 or 12.
Yeah, and authors in general, creatives in general, this is not just authors, it's any sort of creative, are really bad at marketing. I can hear that in your voice. And they're really bad at asking for money. They're really bad at asking for money as well, or talking about money in the most cases. So they tend to get taken advantage of by other people who basically sell their content and make money off it, right?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
So yeah,
you have when you go into the business, you have to understand that what you're doing is you're telling stories. Whereas big publishing companies, they're selling paper. That's the big difference. That's why you'll see that even the electronic versions of the books are still selling for $12, $14, $16 a pop when it's ones and zeros in a digital format. They should be making their money on the paper side, but they can't compete anymore. And they're in the big corporate, mindset, they can't give up money. They can't conceive of the idea that selling something for less will get them more sales. And the indies, as far as, most of us are just happy to make, $5 on a book. Well, or to sell a book for $5 because you don't really make it. Amazon, has to take their cut, and you've got editors and formatters and cover artists and, all of the business end. And you're right. I am terrible with the marketing part. So that's something that,
so from a, sort of a computer background myself, sort of an algorithmic background, it's also, I think it comes down to like being a movie star, being that famous or successful indie author is like being a movie star. There's a certain amount of chance involved, but there's also product quality. I think it does naturally sort of filter out the top quality and the top what the market wants, right? The market is unforgiving, but it's also very specific. It'll tell you what it wants. So the authors that resonate with that market demand tend to do very well. But it's a very small percentage, right? It's a very small percentage. The majority of indie authors end up in that vast middle where, they're surviving or not surviving, right? So I think it does filter a little bit necessarily. It's not 100% clean, but it does filter on product quality, right? So it's got to, again, it's that 1 or 2% top product quality and what the market wants, right? And I see these books where it's really obvious that some author said, okay, the market wants, I don't know, dragon fantasies. And they start writing a bunch of dragon fantasies, right? And of course they fail because it isn't what they wanted, right?
That's the most successful indies. You'll hear them repeatedly harp on the idea that you don't write to market, and at least not in the sense that you don't change what you're writing just to match what the current trend is. What you do is you write the stories that you would like to read. You write for yourself, and you will find an audience because there are other people that have the same taste. And if you're enjoying it, then it comes through in your writing.
Right. And you'll find that audience. And that audience will find you. Now, the caveat there is that audience might be 10 people.
Yeah.
But there's the old concept in Web 2.0 of, all you really need is 1,000 true fans, right? And if you can have 1,000 true fans who will buy anything you sell, then you can survive on that, right? So that's really what it's about, is these micro communities, like the one we're building around the after the apocalypse stuff, these micro communities that
Yeah.
people raise their hand. So in that case, it's an honest sort of marketing, I guess.
There's a lot to be said for word of mouth in that instance too. So
yeah,
absolutely. You've got what, you're pushing 200 people on your Facebook page, correct?
Something like that. Yeah, I think it's 170.
Yeah. So you're going to be up at 200 before too long, but those 200 are going to tell friends. And as the numbers grow, they will begin to grow faster.
Assuming an unconstrained market, that is true, right? Depends on the size of the niche, but in this case, I think you can basically, for my purposes, it's an infinite market for my purposes. Probably because I aim too low.
Yeah, you have to understand how big the market is too. That was something I was very lucky to fall in with a good community of authors when with my first book. And this was 2011, 2012, the end of 2011, when I first published Half Past Midnight. That's how long ago it was. And there was a group of authors that I met and fell in with. And this was right around the time that Kindle was becoming really popular, and Amazon did the first marketing opportunity for you to put your book out there for free as an experiment. And they convinced me to do that with my book. And this is like 3 weeks after I published. And I'm terrified because, all of these people that are going to get my book for free, they're not going to buy it. Why would they? They've got it now.
Yep.
I put it up for free for 24 hours and gave away over 11,000 copies. And it terrified me. And after the reviews started coming in and, people saw it listed, all of a sudden I was selling at first I was selling like 300 copies a day in sales. And this went on for close to a year. Gradually they dropped down to where, you're just getting, 5, 10, 20 books a day. That first year I made over $20,000. I think it's gauche to talk about money, but just to let other authors know that's how it used to work in the old days. But what that did was that gave me an idea of how big the pie really was, because I may have given away, a big piece of it, but there was a whole lot more pie out there. And it was enough to, to keep me going and to make me think maybe this writing thing, that I was just kind of playing with, maybe it's a viable option in the future.
Right. So what else do you listen to in terms of, podcasts or that sort of audio? By the way, you're the guy you got to read your book was awesome. Especially with the protagonists, the voicing of the protagonist. I think he nailed the protagonist 100%. Yeah,
that was Corey Snow, and you because you've already been through this. Going through the auditioning process to find the right voice it's an interesting endeavor. When you find the right voice and you know that you've got exactly what you were after, it makes all the difference in the world. Corey did a fantastic job. He did the first 2 in that series. He did Half Past Midnight and The Road to Rejas. Something happened when I tried to get with him on year 12. Actually, I know several things happened. Amazon had purchased ACX at that point, Audible.
Right.
And they started changing the agreements, changed percentages available for royalty share. They changed... basically, they encouraged a more professional, I guess, marketing model, which is great for the narrators and the voice actors. It's a little tougher on the royalty holders, the rights holders, rather. And it started kicking a lot of people out of the field. It started making it tougher for them either to find the right voice or to be able to afford the right voice. The third book, year 12 in that series, I ended up having to go with someone else. Corey started to do it, and something happened in his life. I didn't cry, but he was unable to finish. And I was willing to wait for him for a while. I kept telling him, but a year later, I still didn't have any didn't have my files to publish. And, a year's worth of sales and a year's worth of momentum is lost at that point. And, we parted ways. It was amicable, but it was rough losing that voice.
Yeah, no, he did a good job. And so what else do you listen to right now? I mean, you stumbled into my podcast.
I don't know if you've ever seen the series Orphan Black.
No.
But okay. It is a surprisingly excellent television show. It's canceled now. I think they had 3 seasons. They always cancel the good ones, right?
Yep.
But the star of the show, Tatiana Amazingly, who is now doing She-Hulk, she played I guess a dozen different roles in the show because it's a show about clones.
And what's the name of it?
And yet she managed Orphan Black. It's on one of the streaming services. I think it might be on Netflix. If not, then it's probably Amazon Prime.
Okay.
And it is amazing, but they have now, I don't know if she got permission or bought the rights, what the deal was, but she did an Orphan Black podcast where she extended the story beyond what they did on the television show. That has been a lot of fun. I've been listening to that. There was another post-apocalyptic one that I have enjoyed. It's an alien invasion apocalypse. And the name of it is End of All Hope. To be perfectly honest, a lot of what I listen to on podcasts are, writing podcasts. Bits about the business, how to run your Amazon ads, other boring stuff.
Yeah. It's you gotta keep bread on the table. So, all right, let's we're over our time here. So let me bring us towards the exit. All right. The shelter exit. We're going to go to the shelter exit and throw you outside into the apocalypse. So
No!
Tell us one thing about you that we don't know. Tell us something we'd be surprised with.
Something you'd be surprised with. Well, I've already gone through the prepper bit.
You want an easier question? I can give you an easier question.
Sure.
Okay.
Because I think most of my stuff is out there in the books. So
okay, what was your first concert you ever saw? Part B is, what was your favorite concert you ever saw and why?
Oh man, first concert, man. For a guy as old as I am, that goes back a ways. I think Chicago, when they came to Houston. This was back in the days when a concert ticket was like $30 and high school kids could afford them.
Chicago. All right.
Yeah.
And your favorite?
My favorite. This is going to sound really weird. Well, it might not for some people. But after this little movie came out, it was, you might have heard of it. It's a little movie called Star Wars.
Yep.
There was a John Williams did the soundtrack to it, and he went around the country doing. Basically, he played the soundtrack to Star Wars, and he did it to a laser light show.
Oh, no kidding.
And this was the first laser light show that I ever saw, and it still sticks out in my mind.
Oh, that's great.
And yeah, very, very much Nerdville, but Star Wars with the laser show.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. Well, thanks for your time this morning. Good luck with all you got going on, and let me know if I can do anything to help you. Keep surviving.
I appreciate it. You bet.
All right,
you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.